Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another author interview here for the month of September here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And joining us today is a returning guest making their second appearance here on the show. Now, many of you remember this guest. He is a self-published fantasy sci-fi writer and screenwriter. He focuses on fast-paced, page-turning, action-filled books with cinematic imagery and powerful heroic moments. He's been writing books since he was 12 years old and has always had a strong passion for storytelling his entire life. And with his books, he aims to inspire other storytellers worldwide to start writing and share their stories. His journey, writing methods, and inspirations are all shared with his followers through his various social media accounts, where he strives to build a writing and reading community that feels like they can connect with the writer behind the words. And he received a BFA in film with an emphasis on screenwriting from the University of Utah. And at the time, he was currently pursuing a master's in screenwriting at Loyola Marymount University, but some updates on that, which I'm excited to announce. And his ultimate goal is to one day teach the next generation of aspiring writers. So, without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to returning guest, author, and screenwriter, Eric Bowden. Eric, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So, before we dive into today's story, viewers and listeners, which, if you can tell, is going to be one of the stories just behind Eric. Eric, is there any updates you would like to give to our viewers and listeners?
Yeah, so I have now kind of moved into the horror genre. So kind of the book we'll be talking about today is my debut horror novel. Last year was kind of my debut novel of fantasy and science fiction. And this year I kind of wanted to stretch my legs, try out a new genre, see what I could do with it. And that's what this book is about. So, just trying to get into the horror genre, and I hope it resonates with people.
Awesome. And the book in question, viewers and listeners, is The Darkness Grows Within, which I must say, cover is very, very gripping and really, really draws you in. So I'm really excited to dive into that. And also, off camera, Eric, you also said that you recently graduated, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm in my final year right now, so we're right at the finish line.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on that. That is a huge, huge achievement.
Thank you so much.
Before we dive into your debut horror novel, as a little refresher for our viewers and listeners, would you like to share sort of like a recap of your journey as an author thus far?
Sure. So I've been, like you said in the bio, I've been writing books since I was about 12 years old. Back then, they were just short stories, novellas, nothing too crazy. And then around high school, I got into screenwriting. I realized that I wanted to pursue that through college and potentially make a career out of that. And in my final year of undergrad, I rediscovered my love for novel writing. And so I went back to that. I started writing the Jadorian Saga, which the first book of that series came out last summer.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I started building, a following on Instagram and YouTube, connecting with people, just realizing that not just the books themselves are like the reason why I do this. It's also to connect with other people and just share the love of writing and reading completely. So I really realized that it's not just about, hey, here's my book, everyone read it. It's more about how can I show people the things that I love, hoping that they also, love the kind of the same things and then would want to read the, similar stuff to what I write and whatever else. And so that also led me down another rabbit hole because I started kind of branching off into different genres. As you can see up there, I'm a big fan of Berserk. And I just realized, hey, I want to try something new. Let's give it a shot. I got an idea. I was in the Met Museum in New York. I saw these gilded silver and gold revolvers, and just the ideas just started coming to me. And next thing you know, a month later, I had The Darkness Grows Within. I had my main character, Wade Russell, the demon gunner, as he's called in the story. And, it really also came from a lot of people who had read the Golden Academy, and they noticed some horror elements within that novel that I don't think I completely intended. And they were like, hey, you should try out a horror novel. So that's kind of where we are today. Thought I would try and get that out there. So far, positive feedback has been great. Love hearing everyone, reading it and enjoying it. And I'm just glad it's out there and that the world can experience it. And now I can get started with the next book.
Nice. Very, very nice. Now, as a little teaser of what fans can expect, nothing too spoilery, but overall, what is the story of The Darkness Grows Within?
So The Darkness Grows Within is the first book in the trilogy called The Demon Gunner. It is dark fantasy, horror, Western. It has all those different genres and elements kind of mashed into one. So if you were a fan of Stephen King's The Gunslinger, or Christopher Buehlman's Between Two Fires, or The Road by Cormac McCarthy, or Blood Meridian, I kind of took elements from all of those books and kind of mashed into one, all my favorite things from those books into one. So we have obviously kind of the Western elements of Blood Meridian and The Gunslinger, but along with the magic of The Gunslinger and kind of that fantasy setting, and then the horror of Between Two Fires and the journey story of The Road with like a father and son. But in my novel, you'll follow a character called Wade Russell. He's the demon gunner. He's on a journey to bring the light back. The world is dying. The light is gone. Life has been sucked out. Everything's dead, dark, decaying. And while on this journey to bring the light back, he comes across an orphan girl named Sarah. And Sarah is lost in this world. Her parents are gone. This demon gunner stumbled upon her, and now he has a choice whether or not to take her or leave her in this town that he found her in. And of course, the hero that he is, he takes her under his wing, teaches her the way of the gun, and brings her on his perilous quest to save the world. So that's pretty much what the first two chapters kind of cover. So, not many spoilers after that, but that should hopefully give everyone kind of an idea. If you're a big fan of fantasy worlds that also have monsters and demons and scary creatures in it and things that, will make kind of your skin crawl, you're going to get lots of that in this. Lots of magic, lots of fantastical elements. I didn't want this book to be too grounded in kind of the Western, old-timey vibes where, there's barely any electricity and all that kind of stuff. And, there's no monsters and no magic. I really wanted to bring all that to the forefront because I felt like, to me, when I read The Gunslinger, that was like the most interesting part of it. I love those elements, and I just wanted more of that, which unfortunately I just didn't really get. And so that's really the biggest inspiration. I was like, okay, can I make a novel like The Gunslinger, but I just bring all those things that I loved about it up to the forefront and really make that the subject of this book.
Fascinating. And I'll say I like these blends of different genres for Westerns because for me, and I'm probably sure you agree with this too, Eric, that the Western genre can be expanded upon, be used as a palette for many different things. Case in point, if we look at media, The Mandalorian is a Star Wars inspired Western. I mean, you have The Mandalorian. He pretty much has one gun that he uses that's on a holster on one of his legs, and he just goes around from traveling from town to town. And he also has a companion too. So it is very, very fascinating what people can do with the Western genre and make it their own. Now, there are going to be some fan questions sprinkled throughout, Eric. Questions that I don't think you've ever had in your previous interview, so this is going to be really fun. So, as sort of like the icebreaker questions for the creation of this story, when you had the idea for this story, did you craft a rough outline of your book, or did you just sort of write spontaneously?
Yeah. So for pretty much all of my books, I never really do an outline. For screenwriting, I think outlines are very, very important because there's just so many elements and kind of film theory that you're having to make sure that, you're checking those boxes. Whereas I find novel writing to be just more of a free expression of your ideas and your thoughts and feelings in that moment. And then the rewriting phase is when you kind of go back and try and, hit maybe some of the points you wanted to that you might have missed before, tighten some things up. So I'm really not much of an outliner. I like to just kind of let the ideas fly. I find that, at least for me, outlines are kind of constraining in the sense that they put you into a box that, oh, the story has to go in this direction, or I have to be doing this, this, and this. But I like the discovery of writing. That's actually what keeps me coming back. Usually when I start a novel, I always try and have obviously the beginning and then the end. I always need to know at least where it's going to end up. But anything in the middle is fair game for the discovery. And if my story starts going in a different direction, which always seems to happen, I just kind of let it ride. And that system has always worked out very well for me and my writing style. And that's probably what has kind of kept me from burning out, because I'm at 5 books now in about 2-3 years. So it's kind of one of those things, is what works best for you. I'm not the one, like I said, for screenwriting, you need an outline. I would never write a screenplay without outlining it first, but a novel, I'm just going to sit down and start writing it. And that's just what has worked best for me. So it really depends on the methods that work best for you, what you resonate with the most, and what allows you to not burn out, because this field of work is very, very tiring mentally, because you're staring at your own work. You read your book 12 times over, line by line, word by word, and it can easily burn you out. That's the best way to describe it. So to me, adding another thing like an outline would just probably be too much. And the enjoyment for me comes with that discovery. So that's usually how it works for me.
All right. Okay. And then from that point, did you have a routine or ritual that kept you centered to make sure that, let's say, if you had a release date coming up and you wanted to adhere to that, what kept you grounded and focused? Or did you have a ritual or routine?
Yeah. So I would say 2 routines or kind of philosophies that I live by are sit down and write every day. There are a few times where I'm not writing every single day, but when I'm in the writing mode, when I'm writing another book, which will be coming out probably in the next few weeks, I am writing every single day. Even if it's, I try and get a chapter in a day, but even if it's not a chapter, maybe it's half a chapter, that's fine. A few paragraphs, a few words, anything counts. So those are the two philosophies that I live by. If you're not feeling up for writing, it takes a lot of motivation, a lot of discipline to do this, but you got to just sit down and write. Just sit down and start. And I guarantee you the ideas and everything else is going to come with that act of just getting yourself in the seat. Put your phone in the other room and just lock in. And then writing every day keeps you in that routine where you're not thinking, oh, should I write today? Should I not? You already know you're going to do it. I don't really relate to people who say that they don't enjoy writing as authors, because it's like, it's kind of your job. And what other career has the luxury to be like, oh, today I'm just not going to go to work today? It just, that kind of thing isn't allowed. You get fired, you lose your job, and in writing, that's, I don't want to say allowed, because you obviously never create anything, but there is some room where, oh, I'm just going to not do anything today and whatever else. So by treating it like clocking in, clocking out, I have to do this today, then the rest of my day I can plan around, that keeps me in a really good routine of, check the box. Every single day I'm writing something. And that's usually how I end up getting a book done pretty quickly.
Absolutely. And then ultimately writing this book, what were your goals for this new project as the author, but also the promise making to not just your current fans and readers, but future fans and readers?
I really just, again, I want to show these philosophies that it is possible to create things when you have that set routine. If you have the idea, the story, it's never going to fully materialize unless you lock in on it. You work every single day on it until it's done. I even think sometimes the writing is going to be worse if you give it time, to kind of leave your mind. If you stay on it, that's going to be probably your best work. So I definitely want this book to stand for those philosophies that I mentioned. And then also just kind of cementing myself in the horror genre and showing people that, hey, this is something that I want to get into. I'm a huge fan of horror. I have the utmost respect for it. I love genre, and I feel like the horror genre is up there with the best. I think it's honestly one of the most beautiful, because the amount of stories that you can tell, the deconstruction of characters that you can really get into, putting your protagonists into uncomfortable places, making them face their greatest fears. There's just not many genres that get your heart racing like horror, or put you on the edge of your seat, or make you curl up behind a blanket. So that's probably my biggest thing for future writers, is like, hey, I love this genre and I would love to continue to tell stories in it. And I hope that this first novel gives you the confidence that I can kind of keep doing this and hopefully, create more great horror novels. So that's ultimately the goal, is not just being a science fiction and fantasy writer, or that this is just a one-off. I would love to keep this going and write horror for the rest of my life.
And that kind of leads into another fan question, which is, for you, Eric, what were some of the challenges that you discovered along the way transitioning into this new genre? Because horror has its own set of rules, its own elements that authors have to understand. It's not like fantasy or sci-fi. Not to say that you couldn't have horror in those other genres, but the horror genre, or the gothic literature, has its own identity. So what are some of the challenges that you discovered along the way when writing your book?
So coming from a background of fantasy, and then this book also being dark fantasy, it was really a matter of balancing the scares with the world building. So in my opinion, horror works best in self-contained environments. That's why you see so many haunted house horror movies, because that's really what scares us, is when humans don't like to be with their back against a wall, having to face the thing they fear the most.
Right.
So when you are creating, let's say, for instance, in my book, The World of Rodon, you are having to flesh that out. You're having to do a lot of the world building, a lot of the groundwork, but that's not scary. So it was a matter of, how do I balance that? And I think too many scares just becomes tiring to read. So the method that I kind of figured out was, if I had a really heavy chapter, then I would have maybe a flashback chapter or a more mellow chapter, and more character work and more world building, and then go back to the dark, demon-infested world of Rodon, get those scares, get those kind of skin-crawling moments. And that's what kind of ended up working for me the best. So I would say that was the biggest challenge, is really just, how do I make this book, scary, but also craft a dark fantasy world that you want to get invested in and care about and feel like it's real and that it has history. So
Absolutely. And kind of along the same lines, another fan question is, for the characters in your story, how did you make them feel authentic, yet also complex and compelling, to a point that it makes sense for these characters to exist? Because I'm sure you would also definitely agree, Eric, that when it comes to writing characters, you want them to, of course, have some archetype traits, but you don't want them to be a copy of another character. In the case of, you didn't want your character to be a knockoff of the gunslinger from the Dark Tower series. He was probably a starting point, but ultimately the gunslinger, quote unquote, in your story is vastly different and unique to the gunslinger of the Dark Tower series by Stephen King.
yeah, absolutely. And, Roland Deschain from The Dark Tower was a big inspiration. I think that anyone who reads those books, they read it for Roland. And I wanted a character that gave you that same feeling, that when you start the Demon Gunner series, you're sticking around for Wade Russell. And having kind of a dual protagonist story, I feel like in a lot of today's media, what happens is, even though it's dual protagonist, they sideline one character in favor of the other. They think that by making, let's say, like the apprentice or someone more of like a boss, I can do everything myself, I don't need you, that makes them strong and powerful. And in reality, I don't find that to be very good storytelling. So I really wanted to make a story where they both had their moments to shine, but no matter how powerful they become or how strong they become or whatever, they still need each other in some way.
Yes.
Wade needs Sarah in this story for the emotional support, unraveling his past and his trauma. And, she's a beacon of light and hope and innocence in this really dark world. And he needs that to stay committed on this quest, this dangerous quest. And obviously, with her not having a family anymore, she also needed someone to rely on. She also needed to find her inner strength, a reason to fight, a reason to keep going herself, because her world is gone. So they both find those comforts and strengths within each other. Even though, Wade is this powerful gunslinging type character, he has that softer spot. And even though Sarah has that softer spot, she also can step up into the role of being a gunslinger herself. And learning the way of the gun and that kind of thing. And even though that's not the background that she was raised in, unlike Wade, who grew up being a gunner, is what it's called in my story, he has so much to teach her, and then she has so much of the innocence and the light that is still inside her to give to this cold, jaded, weathered man. So there's definitely, that benefit. It's a symbiotic relationship between the two, and they're not, one's not overpowering the other. I'm not trying to make Sarah, be better than Wade and whatever else, or vice versa. I wanted both of them to be their own people, but in order for this story to work with dual protagonists and this journey story, they had to rely on each other.
Yes.
So.
Very true. Absolutely very true. And also, with the creation of this world, going back to what you said, that you wanted to be haunting and terrifying because this world is all of that, but you wanted to be inviting, to be a world that you can immerse yourself in. So how did you go about creating a world that's also immersive, but also very gripping and compelling?
That was probably like I said before, that was probably the hardest part, is like how much world building is really needed to A, tell the story, and B, still get the scares. So in my master's program last year, I took a class called world building, and I thought it was just going to be this class where we just talk about all of these worlds that we have and these different languages and all this history and different, elves and goblins and all this kind of stuff and these big battles. And what my professor taught me was, how do we create the biggest story in the smallest world possible? That's true world building. It's actually not just going all out, which, especially in the fantasy genre, it seems like so many debut authors love to just, dump all this lore and world building and exposition, all this stuff. And it just feels like, it's like, oh, well, where's the character? What hooks me? Why do I need to care about that kind of stuff? And so to me, I wanted to create a world that, yes, that there is history. Yes, that there are like Easter eggs, callbacks, all this stuff. But the story that you need to pay attention to is the one that's happening right there.
Right.
Any of the world building is going to come naturally with the story. It's going to blend in. But there's no chapter or time where you're just sitting there just getting lore dumps over and over and over and over again without it pertaining exactly to the story. So I really just wanted, especially with the Jadorian saga, I felt like the world building got really, really big. And even with the second novel, which is already written, and the third and the fourth, those, after taking that class, those novels will get trimmed down so much, because it's like, what is really needed to tell my story in the best way possible?
Right.
Do I need a creationist story? Do I need to talk about the beginning of the universe to, tell this tale of this kid trying to do the best job he can and be a hero, and obviously failing and, not always succeeding, but still getting up and trying to do it? Do you need to know the beginning of the universe? I don't think so. And so I learned that, and I really tried to put that into this novel. It's like, okay, I'm telling a story of the light of the world leaving and darkness taking its place. So let's just start going from there. Let's just start the character walking through this world. And if he sees things, cool, but you don't need an explanation for every single thing he sees and this and that. And then you don't need to know the exact start of it, the beginning, every thought that's in Wade's mind about Rodon. I want it to be, piece by piece, drip feeding kind of thing, where you're not getting it all just all at once, and you're slowly getting absorbed into the world while really trying to focus on the character interactions with that world.
Absolutely. And there's a two-part fan question, which I think is very important. So for you, Eric, also from your bio, you're very cinematic in how you approach scenes, storytelling, character interactions, and so forth. And also, definitely the conflict as well. The conflict is probably among the many things what truly grips the reader and really pulls them in. So for your book in particular, what has been your favorite way to introduce conflict into the story? And how do you balance the emotional depth of the characters as well as the story with the conflict that the character encounters along the way, and overall the world that the conflict resides in?
Yeah, especially with horror, you have to scare the audience, obviously the reader, and that is one of the biggest challenges, is balancing the action and the scares. And then obviously, like with your question, where do you bring the character out and all that? And I think that in order to properly scare the audience, you have to build the character into a vulnerable person. You have to make them fear for their life, because, like, let's take Invincible for instance. Look at Omni-Man. You put
Yeah.
Omni-Man in the ship with the xenomorph in the movie Alien. That's not going to be scary because the xenomorph's not going to hurt Omni-Man because, he's invincible and this and that. But then when you have Ripley, who can be hurt and has these fears and these flaws and isn't this just all-powerful character, that's what really gets you scared, because now all of a sudden, there's stakes. You're invested. So I think that you have to do the groundwork. You have to build a character. And once you kind of develop what is their like fatal flaw, as we say in screenwriting, what is that and how can we expose their greatest fear and their flaws? How can we make them vulnerable? How can we take, let's say, a gunslinger character and put him in a position where he doesn't have his guns? What does he do then? For someone who's always relied on the way of the gun, how do you remove that from him and how does he react? Does he survive? Does he implode? Does he run away and hide? That to me is a much more interesting, version of a story. And even when you look at like the Gunslinger and Stephen King and everything, in the second book in that series, Stephen King kind of had to knock Roland down a peg because he was almost too powerful. And he was like, well, this isn't going to be that fun if Roland can just defeat everyone. So let's kind of nerf him a little bit. So I think in order to kind of have to avoid that, you definitely don't want to make your character too powerful and just being able to defeat all the threats. You have to make him vulnerable. You have to make, your character lose something in the process and be able to not save everyone. No matter how many bullets, how good of a marksman he is, you have to be able to give him stakes that he cannot overcome or can overcome, but with tremendous loss or great adversity. So yeah, it was really about how do I set the stage for who these characters are, and then how do I break them down and make them their most vulnerable.
Very true, Eric. And we talked about a lot of great things about the creation of the story and writing in general. And I think what you've also mentioned earlier is going to relate to this question is, there are going to be days when we're not going to have the motivation or the drive to write. Or if we do, we may be stuck on an idea or a scene and it's going to infuriate us. And we're just going to be a dog with a bone until we actually get it down on paper, whether it's good or bad. So for you, Eric, throughout your journey, how have you been able to handle the dreaded writer's block?
It's been interesting. I guess two parts of that question. For me, writer's block has never been a massive issue just because I love writing so much. So I'm just going to sit down and write something. There are days where I don't feel like writing more than others, but usually writer's block has never really hit me that hard. I've somehow always kind of been able to keep going, and obviously very, lucky to have that be the case, because I know that's not the case for a lot of people. But yeah, writer's block is not a big thing for me. I wish I could kind of speak on it more. I think that if I were to have writer's block, I would just sit down and just start writing anything. I heard a great quote from a while ago. I can't even remember who said it now, but they said that writer's block comes from your own self-critique. It comes from a feeling of inadequacy, feeling that, well, this isn't that good, so how do I keep writing anything? Because I think that you can put something on the page, but it is a matter of, what am I critiquing myself? So what I heard is save the critiques for the rewrite and just get something down, because it's not set in stone, and writing is an organic and constantly changing, medium. It's not, when you put it down, it's in pen and that's it. The whole point of writing, especially like on a computer, is that you can delete, you can copy and paste, you can clear out entire sections. That's the beauty of it. So for people who are struggling with writer's block, I usually start with that. If it's a matter of ideas and you can't come up with anything, then that's another story. But mostly writer's block comes from people feeling like I'm not taking this story in the direction I need. This isn't good enough. And that's usually where people get stuck. So I took that out of my kind of writing routine, and no more writer's block. So that was one part of it. And then the second part is that I don't write unless I have an idea or an inspiration. If I have no ideas, I won't sit down and write. But if I have an idea and then I sit down, then I'm committed. Then I have to see it through. But if I'm just not, the inspiration is not there and I have no ideas, what I do is I absorb other media. I watch movies, TV, I listen to music, I read, as you can tell, a lot of books. That's one of my biggest things. And I think especially for writers, reading is probably the most beneficial out of all the mediums. But you know, I try and find things that inspire me, because when I read something that gives me that feeling like, oh, that was a damn good story, then it almost feels like I have that calling, like I need to also put something else out to the world and hopefully inspire or give someone a piece of art that resonates with them, just like what I just experienced with like a life-changing work or something. So yeah, you know, my biggest tip is like, don't sit down and try and force the idea out if it's not there. You got to have the idea first, then you sit down and start chipping away at it. But once you sit down, don't stop.
Very true.
Those are the two tips and kind of thing, my view on writer's block. But it really varies person to person.
That is true. That is very, very true. Now, before I get into some reflective questions, I did, of course, want to touch on, you know, what has been the overall response from The Darkness Grows Within. And kind of the lead up to that, which I'm sure you'll definitely agree, Eric, that for authors who are just beginning or, you know, on their path, it is a very lonely venture because it is all on us. We spend hours and hours, if not years, drafting the first version of a story. Then, after a series of rewrites and edits, make the decision to publish it. And as I've had a lot of people on the show before, some people have told their friends and family that they are working on something new or their first story, while others have automatically told them at the very end when the book is completed. So for you, Eric, and how you approach storytelling, did you let your friends and family know in the beginning that you were working on something new, or when it was near completion? And overall, what has been the feedback like from The Darkness Grows Within?
So yeah, great question. The first part of that, I really kept this one under wraps. I think that with the Golden Academy, which is the first book in the Jadorian saga from last year, I felt like I just gave that to anyone who was willing to read it, because that's kind of what you need to do when you are starting out. I think Brandon Sanderson talks about this. He goes, get your work out there. Don't, you know, treat it like your baby and you can't, you know, no one can see it and no one can give you ideas or anything about, you know, critiques or whatever else. Get it out there. In all honesty, let people tear it apart. Let people shred it. You know, even people might hate on it, but the reality is all of that stuff is going to make you a better writer. It's going to bring out your best work. And also it's going to make you resilient. You're going to get thicker skin because of it. As if you know, hide and not, you know, put your work out there, your whole life is kind of going to be a lie because you don't actually know what people really think of it. So for that first book, I really tried to do that because that is the first novel. And that was a really big step of like, am I cut out for this? You know, do people even want to read what I'm writing? And after a lot of people have read it and I've gotten, you know, a ton of feedback on it, I'm definitely more confident now that I'm on the right track, especially with being in my third year of my graduate program. It's almost expected now of being like, you should know how to write a story at this point. Whether or not everyone's going to love it, you should at least know the structure and the beats that you need to hit and, you know, character dynamics and things like that. So I felt more confident that I didn't have to give this to everyone off the rip. And I'm actually very happy I did that. So my parents didn't read this until it was pretty much near completion. And that was awesome because they're always usually the first people who, read my work. And so I just kept telling them, I said, just trust the process. I have this idea. I told them I was writing something. I actually started writing it when I was visiting them last summer. And so they saw that I was working on something, but I wouldn't let anyone read it. I genuinely did not let anyone read it, not because I was afraid, but because I knew what I was making, and I knew that I wanted them to see the full vision at the end. And then they could give me critiques and things like that. But I just realized that I had changed that first book so many times that having people read those first early drafts is just kind of a moot point, because you're going to end up changing most of that stuff anyways. So with this book, I wanted to get it as close to being done as possible. And then I opened it up, started sending it to friends, family, this and that. And then one other thing I learned too during that process was that, not everyone is going to love or your work. And horror is very divisive.
Yes.
You can't, not everyone loves horror. And I'd learned that not the hard way, but like kind of in a surprising way, because I would send it to people that I'm like, hey, I've got this new book out. And they're like, oh, sorry, I don't read, horror, scary things. That's not for me. And it's like, so it doesn't matter and that's also another life lesson. It doesn't matter how great you think your work is. It's not going to resonate with everyone. And you have to learn that that's okay. Yeah. And even non-writers should learn that. Because I have a lot of people on YouTube that if I don't share the same view as this incredible book that everyone thinks is so amazing, they think that, oh, I have terrible ideas or opinions, or I wasn't smart enough to understand the book, or whatever else it is. It's a matter of like, hey, you're entitled to your own opinion, and not everything is going to resonate. And just because you might think, oh, this book is the greatest in the world, not everyone's going to view it the same way. So it's a really good exercise in understanding that everyone's going to have different thoughts. And if you write polarizing work and in different genres, specifically like horror, no matter how great you think the story is or how it could speak to a lot of people, some people will not even touch it. Same thing with superheroes, because I write superheroes too. You tell someone, hey, I'm a superhero writer, I don't really do that. You know what I mean? Right. But it's the same kind of stuff where, I don't really watch like a ton of romance or a ton of like historical dramas. Just that kind of stuff doesn't really, I prefer the more fantastical stuff. So yeah, just this book was just one of those things where I wanted everyone to see it at the end, and then understanding that not everyone was going to read this. So yeah, I feel like honestly, more people probably have read, well, for it being out for a year now, that's probably true. More people have read the Golden Academy, but I think off the rip at the start, more people read the Golden Academy than The Darkness Grows Within, because there's more fans of fantasy and science fiction than there are straight horror fans. And I'm okay with that. I want this to be a niche book, because this is the book I say, if you're a fan of Dark Souls, if you've been looking for that Elden Ring, Dark Souls, horror, monsters, demons kind of thing, if you're looking for all that in literary form, this book is going to be for you. If you don't want to get scared, if you don't want to see demonic, horrific kind of things, that's totally okay. This book isn't for you. So that's that. And then I guess the reception, been really good. It obviously is still very early. So the people who have read it have mostly been close friends and family. And I have heard from just a few other people who are definitely enjoying it, but I wish I could say more. I don't have a ton of feedback on it yet. Maybe after this video that might change. But again, it's a longer book, and it's only been out for about 2 weeks now, a week, 2 weeks. So, I'm giving it a little bit more time, but we'll see. And, Brandon Sanderson, he says not to read reviews anyways. So I hope people like it. I hope it resonates with them. I can't say I'm going to, be just combing through all the reviews and seeing, oh, did everyone like this part? It's like, the book is out there. it is what it is. I can't change that at this point. The only thing I can do is keep moving forward, with this next one. So
very true. Very, very true. And this kind of leads into, this discussion of, preferences and what is to be an author, especially in today's digital age, which I'm sure you could definitely agree, Eric, that being an author in the digital age is vastly different to what it was to be an author 20 years ago. The industry has significantly changed. And especially for indie authors ourselves, being authors during this period of time, it's a blessing and a curse. And pretty much that all ties with social media. Social media is a huge tool for indie authors. It allows us to connect with our viewers and listeners if we are on YouTube, Instagram, or any other platform. But unfortunately, we do leave ourselves exposed to the negative side of social media. And of course, imposter syndrome will be there in some shape or form, and heightened anxiety is always going to be there because social media does have that effect. So for you, Eric, when you were writing your stories, did you ever have those moments of heightened anxieties or imposter syndrome? And what has disciplined you to continue writing? I know you've said in the beginning that you want to inspire the next generation of authors. Can you go a little bit more in detail about that?
Yeah, you'll probably have to remind me each question
Of course.
as I go. So for the first one, I guess I'll start with imposter syndrome, and then you can remind me the next two because it might be long. But
Of course.
imposter syndrome is a really hard thing. It's really challenging, and I've definitely felt it. I think that what has helped me with imposter syndrome the most is going and listening to other authors that are famous. Nearly all of them will say that they felt like giving up or that what they were writing wasn't good. And that is very eye-opening because it's like you think that they're just these monoliths that can do no wrong and are so amazing. And obviously they knew from the very beginning that they were so good, but you look at Harry Potter and how many times that was rejected, or Stranger Things trying to get picked up, how many times that was rejected, and all these different authors who only got famous super late in their life or after they died or whatever else. And you look at it, it's like it's not just an easy formula of like what makes you a good author, what makes good writing, what makes authors famous or well known or bestsellers. If it was, then everyone would be doing it and everyone would be a bestseller and all these things. So the difficulty is actually what makes it rewarding. And with difficulty comes second guessing, because hard things require mental fortitude. You have to be able to push through. So just because you think in your mind, oh, what I'm writing isn't good, are you going to listen to it? Why do you need to listen to that voice? So going in, hearing other authors who are successful and listening to them saying, I had days where I thought that this was junk and I never wanted anyone to see it. And like, I think Stephen King didn't want Carrie to be read by anyone or published, and his wife ended up making him publish it. And look how big that was. So, launch his career to the moon. And it's like, there you go. If that guy in that story, if he thought that he didn't have it, then it's like, well, no, duh, everyone else. It's like, it's just a human instinct. I think it's honestly good to have imposter syndrome, because I think the opposite is narcissism and thinking that I'm just the greatest. This is going to be a bestseller immediately. I can do no wrong, blah, blah, blah. That to me is worse than imposter syndrome. So
right,
as long as you don't let the imposter syndrome stop you from writing, you don't let it win, then I actually think it's a good thing to have, because it keeps you grounded, keeps you humble, keeps you realizing that there's always work to be done and room for improvement. So, let the imposter syndrome flow through you. That's the best way I can describe it. And for me, that's always been what I've done. I've just sometimes I sit there, I'm like, oh my God, I read a book and I'm like, I just don't understand how I can even compare to, Frank Herbert's Dune. It's like, how
Right.
can I even get close to that? But then it's like, I don't have to be that. I don't have to write Dune. I want to write Eric Bowden books. I want to write books that resonate with people. And then another thing that really helps is when someone does read your work and it does resonate with them and they say, hey, I love this, I want the next one, which has happened very randomly. Just I'll meet someone that I haven't seen in years and they're like, oh my God, I want to, what happens to Caden? I want to know the next book. I want to know what, I want to see more Dorian Saga. I'm like, whoa, like you care. And that's really cool. And that means a lot to me. And that, I would say, is the biggest thing that helps with imposter syndrome, is like, if it connected with one person, then I'm happy. So I hope that helps people embrace the imposter syndrome, but don't let it hold you back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the follow-up to that question was, as opposed to motivation, what has disciplined you to continue writing and telling the stories that you want to tell?
Got it. And I think you also mentioned some social media in there. So I guess I can kind of tie it in all together. So yeah, I'll start with the motivation. So for me, I think I've talked about this before with you, it's just an instinct. I have to write. I have to tell stories. It's not, I can't live without it. It's a form of release. It's a form of therapy. It's a form of getting my thoughts out into the world. And I love it. I need to. There's just too much in my brain to not get it out onto paper. I have to talk about it. I have to get my thoughts, because if they just sit up there and, are constantly in my mind, I'm just too distracted. And that's honestly why I write books so quickly, is because I have to get it out. There's no other option. If I don't, I'm not going to be able to focus on anything else. So yeah. So, for me, the motivation is really an intrinsic thing. I never say I have to motivate myself to write. I think that comes from not loving writing. I think that if you have to motivate yourself to sit down and tell a story, then I think that you're not having fun with it, which stinks. And I understand everyone's different, and it might be there, it might not, but in reality, there's plenty of other things that I love to do. I love dirt biking. I love weightlifting. I love, playing pickleball, rock climbing, all those things, fun things, watching movies, reading books. I don't have to really force myself to sit down and watch a movie. I don't have to force myself to go dirt biking. I don't have to force myself to go, lift weights. Like, I like doing all that stuff. Riding is just another one of those things that it's like, oh, we're riding today. Hell yeah, let's do it. So to me, that's where the motivation comes from. But of course, not everyone is the same way. And so a tip that I would share, because I know that, that's not everyone is going to view it that way. Again, find those inspiring things. Read something. Find something that truly, truly inspires you and makes you sit down and go, I have to tell my story right here, right now. And if you can't find anything inspiring, then I would honestly do some work internally, put the writing aside, make sure you've got your mental state right, make sure your life is in order, make sure those elements are working, because it's damn hard to write a book when those things aren't connecting. And if you kind of sort some of those things out, or you lean into either pain or stress or whatever, sadness, things that you're going through, loss, lean into that and let that out. Like, don't internalize that. Get that out into your writing. And I guarantee it'll be the best work you make, because you can't, like, it's always funny. I always think, like, when my life is going great, I don't actually write that well. And then when my life is like not as great, I write the best, because it's hard to fake those true emotions and feelings. And so that's my tip, is like, try and lean into that. find those inspiring things. And then if the mental state, if whatever is going on isn't right, lean into that, channel that into your work. And I guarantee it will resonate with people, because there's so many people who are going through that same thing. And you can't, like I said, you can't fake those feelings. So it's going to feel very authentic. And I think a lot of people will resonate with that.
Absolutely. A lot of discussions on social media of like the hardcore battle of AI. And I, for one, my stance is if you're using AI to write stories, that's not really helping the craft, because it creates a false sense of creativity and it mass produces it. Now, I understand that AI has a lot of gray areas, and I'm sure you definitely agree, Eric, that AI is in every other software, from editing softwares, narration softwares. So there are some elements like Grammarly or other writing aids. And yes, AI is tied to that. But I think getting back to this notion of AI and writing, you're absolutely right that there are books that have been written using an AI prompt, and there are people who are able to just pump out 5,000 page stories in a week, whereas you and me and many others who slave away honing our craft is just sad. So ultimately, Eric, I would like to hear your thoughts on, AI in the publishing industry. And in your opinion, do you think it is as great a threat as people are making it out to be? Because people have noticed that narrators are losing their positions for narrating books with AI taking over. Some books have been written using AI, in case of that famous situation that a book had a prompt at the very end of the page and it wasn't removed. And people know what I'm talking about because it has made waves. And it's this big debate, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think it's a tool. I think it's a tool just like anything else. I think it's one of those things where if you use it correctly, I have no issue. I'm a big fan of it for grammar and spell checking and word finding and things like that. I definitely think that that's a great tool. And it's like if the resource is there, you got to kind of allow it. We're entering a new stage. I don't really appreciate the witch hunt of like everyone just, oh, this is AI, take it down, this and that. Like if someone needs to use that to write, that's on them. If you're using it to create your story, to come up with your ideas, to do any of the actual creative work on it, I think that it's just going to hurt you, and probably no one's going to read it because AI just doesn't have that emotion behind it. And I think that your stories have to come from a personal place. So in that scenario, AI's junk, but I definitely don't think using it to help with your grammar or, like I said, spell checking, things like that. It's a tool. We've had those tools since, before ChatGPT and all that stuff kind of came out. So I wouldn't rule it out for things like that. But, I just think that the people who are using it to just create junk is going to either get washed away with how much stuff is coming out. Like I said, it's so easy to get your work out there, but it's never been harder to get seen. So with that being said, that stuff's just going to kind of be there and gone, or it's never even going to be noticed at all, or it's going to get absorbed by people who don't know the difference. And there are a lot of people like that, because you look at YouTube shorts and you look at videos with just AI voices and, subway surfers playing below the video. People sit there and watch it, gets millions of views. So who's to say that that person's not doing something? I can't say they're creating anything, but are they doing something? Are other humans looking at it? Sure. Okay. Leave it up. Have fun. But the real stuff will last. The real stuff will persevere. And I think that if you're relying on that, it's just going to be, you're just hindering yourself, but it's also not a big deal because it's like no one's going to see it anyways. Like no one's going to be reading it or getting invested. And I'm a big believer in that the people care about the author behind the work and not the words, or sorry, the words on the page are important. The story is important, but I do think that people often come back because they do care about the author, very much so. I love a good story, but I also love reading about the author, like Cormac McCarthy. Like, that guy was very elusive and hidden, and kind of lived his life incognito. And to me, that made him that much more interesting. I wanted to learn more about him and his work, and like, how does he write something like Blood Meridian? I wanted to know about him. So that's a big thing I try and do with my stuff, is like, I want people to get to know me. I don't have a crazy life like Cormac McCarthy, but I have thoughts, I have opinions, I have feelings, and I want people to know that stuff. I want people to connect with, the way I think and view the world and discuss. And if they think differently, that's okay. And I want to be able to get into discussions and kind of, share those thoughts. And so, yeah, I think the person behind the words is really what a lot of times keeps people coming back and invested and gives you a reason to care, especially when you're a new author, because
Yes.
a random book with a random name on it and a random cover is not going, you've got it. That's why I always try with my stuff, is like, I try and show me, my face, the things that I'm reading, the things I'm invested in and inspired by, because then I think people will be like, oh, okay, I like this guy. I can see the vision. I can see what he's about. I'll give the Golden Academy a try. I'll give the Demon Gunner a try. So.
Very true. Very, very true. Almost near the end of this incredible author interview, Eric, so I'm going to touch on the last few questions and combine them into two-parters.
Okay.
So when you began publishing your works, looking back, what has been some of the most surprising elements you've learned about the publishing industry? And looking back on your journey thus far, is there anything you would have done differently?
Yeah, it's been a very interesting road of balancing the look at me, get my book out there, and the art behind it, and the working in silence. So for the first book, I unveiled the cover and I unveiled a release date with the cover. And I thought that was really cool, perfect, whatever. And then I ended up having to delay. So that wasn't good, because I didn't like having to move the release date back. I felt like it lost some of the hype, and that stinks, but it's a learning lesson. So I learned that lesson. So my next book, I went, okay, I kind of got in a pickle. I had a writers conference that I had a booth at, and I had to pretty much unveil the book there, because I was going to take promotional material, and I needed to, I was going to unveil the cover and the title and everything, but I didn't have it done yet. I just had the art and the typography done and all that. So I was like, oh man, well, okay, I need to unveil it, but I don't have the release date. So what I'll do is I'll unveil the cover, but I'll say release date TBD, and we'll figure that part out later, because I didn't want to make a false promise. And then a month passed, and then another month passed, and then another month passed. And all of a sudden, 3-4 months had passed, and the book was finally done. And I just wanted to get it out there. And I wanted to do a very quick, because I realized the iron had already grown cold from the cover unveiling. And then people have waited long enough that they probably just want it now. So I said, the book's coming out in 3 days. Have fun. And for better, for worse, I like that way better. I enjoyed it. I was like, wow, this is really cool. I love quick releases. A lot of musicians are doing that these days. You just unveil it, say out tonight, done, because people's attention spans are just so kind of weak now. And everything, right. We live in such a fast paced world and society and things like that. So to me, it really feels like, everything just comes and goes. So I wanted it to be a quick, here's the book, see you later. But with that, the rollout might not have been long enough. I don't think enough people have been hooked by it. I think people who had seen the cover, it might, months before, they had kind of either left the page or kind of forgotten about it. And then finally when it, hey, it's coming out, it was like, oh, that book, The interest just isn't there. So going forward, what I would do is cover, absolute release date, maybe a week from when I unveil it, and boom, it's in your hands. So hopefully I'll never have to release a cover without, properly unveiling a release date with it. Because I just don't want to be in that situation again. I'm happy I didn't have to delay it because I never did a release date. So the release date, I hit it perfect. Everything went smoothly. It was tight. It's a tight window, but I managed to get it and I was happy. But going forward, I'd love to do cover, release date, 1 week, rollout begins. There you go. Ad campaign, anything else you can do, interviews, have the promotional material done and set. It's such a hard, when you are a self-published author and you're trying to get out there, it is truly it's a one-man army.
Yes.
You are doing I edit all of my own videos. I do all of my own graphic design. I don't do my own cover art and everything, but I do all my own thumbnails for my YouTube videos. I record all my own YouTube videos. I set up my studio in my apartment every single time I record. That takes time. Then that's just on the promotional side, writing captions, making the post, you're spending money on ads. Then you go from there to the writing side. You're reading the book, you're writing the damn book, then you're rewriting it, then you're reading it and editing it 12 times over. You're going back and forth with a publisher if you have one. You're going back and forth with a cover artist. You're getting all the elements, the design elements out. It is a massive endeavor. If anyone thinks getting into the book writing world and book publishing world is easy, forget about it. And it's sure as hell not passive income. That's absolutely true. It is not passive. It is you have to be working on it. So, but it's the most rewarding thing in the world, because when you get to hold the book in your hands, when it's right there and you see the poster and everything kind of comes together, it's like, wow, I did it. I did something. You know what I mean? So it's super rewarding, but I love the creation of the art. I do not like the promotional side. I love to share what I'm reading and my thoughts and ideas about stuff and whatever else, but the actual sitting down and editing videos and this and that,
nope.
It's that part is just brutal. So you gotta do it though. You have to do it.
That is very true. That is very true. And the two last questions, well, second to last questions, I'm going to combine together to get to the final questions. So as an author, how do you ensure that for all of your books, the endings are satisfying for the reader? But most importantly, when do you make the decision to stop writing?
Oh, man. I have the ending always set. So what I find is the book will keep going and going and going kind of in the middle. Then I'll reach a point where I feel the climax of the story and I know that I should wrap it up, sooner than later. It's more of I feel like the book might be overstaying its welcome. I never want any of my books to drag on, feel like it's just dragging. It's okay, let's just get to the end. What is the point of this? So I feel like that's a big piece of it. It's how do we as authors leave them wanting more? How do we hook them for that next book? How do we not oversaturate our work and make it, too much? So it's kind of like a conversation, with other people. You don't want to talk too much and you don't want to talk too little. You gotta kind of have that balance. So for me, it's when I get to that kind of 2/3 the way, and I don't want to say I'm running out of ideas, but I definitely feel like I don't have much more to say, and that I'm itching to finish it. I'm itching to wrap it up. That's when I know. And then I'm kind of speed running to the end. It's okay, I'm going to tie everything up. Let's get to this ending. Let's do it. I feel like that the authors that are I have this to say and I need to keep going and I don't want to stop with this. And, I know I'm close to the end, but I want to add 20 more things. It's I think it really bogs down the audience in the reader. And I guess I learned that from screenwriting. You have to stick to a very rigid set of rules and structure. In the third act, you're not introducing new characters. You're not introducing new plot lines. You are wrapping things up. And a lot of authors don't adhere to that because they don't have to, for better or for worse. It makes the two mediums different, but I mainly write by screenwriting standards. And to me, when I'm in that third act and I feel like most of the story's been said and it's time to just get to that ending, I'd go full stop all the way, finish it. That's it.
Very true. Very true, Eric. And the final two questions of this incredible author interview are these. With everything you have learned about the industry from your own experiences, its highs and its lows, what is your word of wisdom to fellow authors who are watching or listening to this interview right now? And also, as mentioned in your previous interview and also restated in this follow-up, you want your books to showcase your individuality, your voice. So ultimately, as an add-on, what do you want readers to take away from your books when they pick it up?
I want you to feel something. That's all. I want something, anything in that book to resonate with you, whether it's a quote, whether it's a scene, whether it's a tiny moment, an emotion, an action, a piece of the world building, whatever it is. I just want that to resonate with you. I want one of those things to leave you thinking about it for a day, a week, a month, after a year, years. I've read books that I've, many years ago that I still think about almost on a daily basis. That is the ultimate goal. How can I make my reader feel something? I never want to force them to think the way I do. I never want to force them to get rid of the way they think. I want them to step into my mind, take a look around, and either leave with something or leave it all behind. I want it to be a unique experience. My hope is that you get something out of it, even if it's not enjoyment, because not everyone's going to enjoy what you write. And there are movies that I didn't enjoy, but there is like a scene in it that I was like, whoa, okay, that's quite fascinating. Or they tried something there. They tried to do something unique, and that is interesting. So it's not even like, oh, I want everyone to love my books or enjoy it. It's like, I just hope it makes you feel anything, because
yes,
the worst thing is just apathy, where you just don't feel anything. And you're just sitting there and it's like, oh, that, like, which is what we were talking about earlier with the different, the art and everything, that today, where it just doesn't make, you leave and you're just like, it just didn't really do anything for me. It didn't say anything. That's all I want, is I hope that you leave feeling something, and then I'm happy. So take that as you will. Again, I never want to try and steer anyone with any thoughts and beliefs and this and that with my work. It's like, hey, this is how I think. This is the way I see the world. These are my beliefs. And if they resonate with you, great. They don't, okay, that's great too. I just hope you felt something. That's it.
Awesome. And with that, viewers and listeners, we conclude this amazing follow-up author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I want to give a huge thank you to my friend Eric for making his debut back on the show again. It's always a pleasure having him. Now, Eric, where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out? Where can they check out your books to order? And do you have any special announcements coming out, either a future project or maybe future videos coming to your YouTube channel?
First and foremost, thank you, Gabriel, for having me on for a second time. I really enjoyed this. It always means a lot to be invited back on your show, and, being able to talk about it and engage with your audience. It really means a lot to me. So thank you again for this opportunity. As far as where you can find me, I'm the same everywhere. Eric Bowden Books. YouTube, Instagram are my two big platforms. My novels are published on Amazon. I've got paperback, hardcover, and ebook. And I'm also free with Kindle Unlimited for both the Golden Academy and The Darkness Grows Within. So if you are hesitant on picking up my work and you don't know whether or not you like it or whatever else, hey, you can read it for free on those. So that should give you a easy place to start, not a ton of investment, whatever else. So those are my main areas. I'm just on Goodreads, just with my name, Eric Bowden. I have an author page there. My books are up there. But that's pretty much it. Everything's just Eric Bowden or Eric Bowden Books. And hopefully that keeps things easy and simple.
Awesome.
And then I guess you asked about upcoming stuff. So I'll be starting writing the next Demon Gunner novel. That will be a follow-up to The Darkness Grows Within, a sequel. It has not been written yet, but I have the ending down. I know where it starts. The middle is a little hazy, but I have a lot of fun ideas that I want to play with. I'm just waiting for a bit more feedback to just kind of know where people kind of want to see the story going and this and that, and then I can kind of plan around that. But otherwise, the Jadorian saga will also be continuing. I've got the second book in that series already written. It just needs to be edited, rewritten, fine-tuned and tweaked, and that book will be in your hands. I would probably say in the next 6 months to a year, probably more likely next summer, depending on the timeline, because I'm in my final year graduate school. I'm writing my senior thesis screenplay kind of thing. So I'll be very busy with all that, plus writing another book. So it'll all be coming though. And I promise to keep you guys not waiting for long. So that's my promise. Books will always release. So just stay tuned and you'll have one in your hand. But thanks again.
Awesome. And I will link all that down below in the description of this video. And if you want to see Eric's first interview, his first time on the show, I will also link it right here for you to watch, as well as tagging his YouTube channel down below. Go and check it out. It's a really great channel, very informative. Eric provides some of his feedbacks for all of the books that he has written, as well as some of the books that he has read and he loves to share. So make sure to go and check that out. And as always, viewers and listeners, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with new episodes coming out and future posts and book reviews, which I am posting on my YouTube channel, as well as my website, which I will also link down below. And until next time, viewers and listeners, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you all in the next episode. Until then, have a wonderful Friday, everybody.